Hey everyone, it's Brian here from Massey's Main Entertainment. We're coming here today, taking a little bit of a break from our top 100 movies series with Randy and Doc, and just Rich and I are going to sit down and do something that we kind of discussed a few weeks ago that maybe we want to do. Both of us had sat down and had watched the documentary by Andrew McCarthy about the Brat Pack and how that label was thrust upon that particular group in the 80s, and both of us found the documentary highly fascinating. It was an article that was written by David Plume for the New Yorker magazine about the time these guys were at the height of their popularity, and it referred to the particular group of actors, Demi Moore and Emilio Estevez and Molly Ringwald and Judd Nelson, and all these group of young actors as the Brat Pack, kind of a play on words for from the Rat Pack, which was another group of actors and comedians that did a vast array of film back earlier. So I thought the documentary to me was very, very interesting. I mean, it gave me a whole new perspective about all of those individuals that were kind of wrapped up in there. But Rich, what did you give me some of your thoughts on that documentary? Some of the things that you saw in it.
I liked it a lot. I agree with you. It's like what 30, almost 40 years down the road from when these films were popular. Andrew McCarthy, who directed the documentary, is now I think 60, 61 years old or something. So he's looking back and he's trying to contact these people who he hasn't spoken to in a good 30, 35 years, getting them on the phone, agreeing to sit down with them and just chit chat about their feelings about the article and about their careers. I thought it was very well done. I liked a lot of that documentary much better than some of the films they were in, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And overall, that's what spurred this video on, because Brian and I both saw the documentary and we thought it was interesting and well done. And we said, let's just do some Brat Pack talk about some of the films and see where we go. So that's where we're at. I thought Rob Lowe and Demi Moore in particular had good perspective on their careers, and they didn't let that term Brat Pack impede them for where they wanted to go with their careers. Whereas Andrew McCarthy, whether it's his own doing or not, he chose bad roles maybe, or he let that hinder him a little bit and was never able to overcome it till later when he got some directing jobs and that type of thing. But he has to look himself in the mirror and say, look, was I really that strong of an actor out of my teen years, early 20s, that I was going to have a big career? And history proved that he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree the same thing. You and I are coming, like we were talking a little bit beforehand. We're coming from two generations here. I was living in the generation. Most of those actors were nearly the same age as me. There were some that were a few years, further on, that's for sure. But you come from a generation that's almost a whole generation before seeing them from like almost from the outside, in where I had to be in the middle of the mix there. But I agree with you. I thought some of them, I thought they did a good job of just leaning into the name, and they went on and they had really good careers. Some of them had just okay careers. And then some of them, went on to make Weekend at Bernie's. I mean, that's just kind of what happened. I mean, it's through no fault of anybody else's. I think individuals sometimes don't take ownership of their successes and life and their failures. So, yeah, go ahead.
Didn't you think it was interesting though when he sat down with David Bloom, the writer, that guy stood his ground. He really didn't apologize. He didn't cave in. He didn't say, "Well, I'm sorry. You think I ruined your career." He just said, "I wrote what I saw. I'm sorry you took it the wrong way, maybe, but I wouldn't take back a word." Pretty much is what he said. He stood his ground, and it was kind of awkward watching that.
Yeah,
interplay between the two.
I think Andrew was searching for an apology that just was not coming.
No.
And honestly, I don't think it would have been warranted anyway. I think he's a writer. That's his job. That's the obligation that he has to write about what he's, like you said, like what he sees, and he did that. And he did it. He did it objectively. I thought so.
He did it objectively, but at the same time, back in the '80s, if you remember, a lot of times they were trying to sell magazines or articles, and they might have spiced it up. He might have spiced it up a little bit. The National Enquirer was big, like a rag on the newsstands, and some these talk shows like Sally Jesse Raphael and Morton Downey Jr. There was a lot of sensationalism back in those days, I think. and that was just the literary side of it. But I give him credit for at least sitting down and hashing it out. I felt a little bad for Andrew McCarthy in a way because he had that success early in his career, and he's never really been able to carry it through. Where he saw some of his contemporaries really go into the superstar era.
Right.
I think.
Well, what we decided to do here, ladies and gentlemen, was we were going to just put out our top 5 Brat Pack movies. Now, we sat before with Doc and Randy, and we tried to hash out what movies we thought should be eligible for this. And amongst us 4, we really could not come to a consensus about which movies could. So there could be movies here that you may not think belong in the Brat Pack that maybe we would consider Brat Pack adjacent. And I'm stealing that word from, like, I think Leah Thompson used it in the documentary.
Yeah.
I'll borrow that term from her. So big shout out to Leah Thompson. But what we're going to do is give you our top 5. So, Rich, why don't you start us off? Tell me what number 5 is for you.
Well, just to pick up on where you left off, I looked up the term Brat Pack on Wikipedia, if that's any kind of a source, and they said it's generally described as films that had at least 2 members of the Brat Pack in them. And they only count 12 official Brat Pack movies. And then besides that, they have a bunch of what you call adjacent movies. So some of them may come into play. My number 5 here is 16 Candles, which I rewatched over the weekend. It's not as good as I thought it was back in 1984. It hasn't really held up well. Some of the politically incorrect stuff, especially with the Asian actor in there. There's some couple of one-liners that people would scoff at today, but back then, in a comedy, you could get away with some stuff. There's some what would you call scatological humor in there as well, with flatulence and things like that. But at the time, I really thought if you would have asked me which one of these stars is going to have the best career, I would have bet solid money that it would be Molly Ringwald, and that was a wrong bet because she, I guess she couldn't get over those ingenue, redheaded, pretty girl looks.
Yeah.
And get adult roles after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. She never really had the range. I don't know whether she had opportunity or not, but her career sort of fizzled by the end of maybe into the early 90s. I don't know. But this was like peak for her, mid 80s. A couple of the films we'll be talking about. But I'm going to put it at number 5 because I needed a default kind of 5th place. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Me for number 5, I picked this one. I know people are going to know that to say, well, it's not really Brat Pack, but it's adjacent. I'm going to pick Weird Science. Anthony Michael Hall is in it, and I think it's still directed by Hughes. Is it, or is it? It's still directed. John Hughes directs this one as well.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah. So it's still a Hughes film, which kind of plays a part in, I think, in being in the Brat Pack as well. It also stars, it's got Kelly LeBrock in it, who's just obviously a lot of the reasons that teenage boys like myself probably watch the film. And then it also had Bill Paxton as the brother in this role, as the asshole brother. Just does a fabulous job in it as well. So, I mean, I know it's really a comedy, not really a coming of age type of thing, but it does speak to some of the things that as a teenager your mind is on more than other things, we shall say. And I wanted to include it here. So I got Weird Science at number 5.
Yeah, I considered that because I do like it, but I haven't seen it in a long time. So I left it out, but I found it enjoyable. And Kelly Brock was the highlight for me back then, even though I was probably, 27 when I saw it, but still.
Yeah, even that had some scenes, obviously, that would have, maybe not get through the woke crowd today. So.
Right.
All right.
And that doesn't really bother me, that woke stuff, because you have to consider the time things were made and treat it like a product of the time, or if you want to say work of art, it reflects life at that time, whatever. And that's what these films did. Number 4 for me, again, I think this is a Brat Packy cast, but because it's directed by a legend, Francis Ford Coppola, I'm going to go with The Outsiders as my number 4, because it has a lot of the stars that we're talking about here. Rob Lowe's in it. Emilio Estevez is in it. Who else?
Tom Cruise.
C. Thomas. C. Thomas Howell, Tom Cruise,
Yeah.
whose career is obviously beyond what we're talking about here. Diane Lane is in it. Patrick Swayze. I mean, a lot of the young up and coming stars at that time are in this movie, and it actually predates the John Hughes movies,
Yeah.
The Outsiders. But a lot of these actors would go in. Hughes would pluck them out and put them in some of his movies, I think. But it's an interesting one. It's from a novel by S.E. Hinton. It was popular at the time, and it's well made. Again, it's not exactly my cup of tea, but I think it has to be considered
Right.
as one of the five here.
My number four is going to be St. Elmo's Fire. This is the one where I was a little iffy about whether or not that this movie was actually still any good at all. I just felt like there were so many characters in this movie that it was hard to connect with any one of them for any length of time before they were cutting away to a different segment of that group of individuals. And it's people who just graduated college and they're trying to find their way, be it their career, be it their relationships, or all those things that you go through when you graduate from college and you're looking for your stride in life. All those things. It's got Emilio in it and it's got Rob Lowe in it, although his character's probably not maybe one of the least likable characters in it. Judd Nelson is in it as well, and Allie, of course. But I thought Mare Winningham, when I thought her performance in it was really good, and I love the fact that she went on to do really solid acting roles after that, despite the fact that she wasn't probably the pretty girl out front type of person that the other
Right.
girls in the cast were. I thought she did a great job. So I wanted to include St. Elmo's Fire. Plus, I guess, killer song written by John Parr kind of promoted the movie as well. So
Yeah, that might be it's in the discussion anyways, one of the quintessential Brat Pack movies because everybody's in it.
yeah,
The whole, all those people we were talking about her, and I do like Mare Winningham too. She's exceptional.
yeah,
So that's a good call there. My number three, I went with Less Than Zero. Uh, Not directed by Hughes, but I enjoy Andrew McCarthy's actually pretty good in this. He plays a prep school kind of socialite, Beverly Hills kid, wealthy, and he's got this best friend Robert Downey Jr., who's a complete drug addict. Uh, Stealing, robbing his friends, and pimping himself out for money. His father throws him out. He's living in the backyard of McCarthy's house a lot of times, and it has some tragedy in it, obviously, but I just like that title too, Less Than Zero. I mean,
yeah,
that's bottom of the barrel stuff, but I think it works. Jamie Gertz is the female interest in here, and she does a good job. James Spader plays a real in it. I mean, a total asshole uh, who's rubbing Robert Downey Jr.'s face in the dirt and real smug. But I think it's an effective movie. I've watched it repeatedly. Maybe I've seen it 5 or 6 times through the years, and it always has an effect on me. As a well-made film, and I might be McCarthy's best role,
yeah,
which is not saying a whole lot.
yeah,
He's pretty good in it.
yeah. Yeah, if I remember right,
I'm
they
gonna.
had the Bengals did a soundtrack. They did a cover of "Hazy Shade of Winter"
That's right.
for the
Yep.
soundtrack, which was a big song at the time. Uh,
And cocaine was big. They're in the nightclubs doing their girls' noses are bleeding from coke. The excesses of having too much money at an early age, living off their parents' wealth, and really trying to find themselves. I'm sure a lot of kids that grew up privileged went through this. So seemed accurate to me.
yeah. Okay, my number three, I kind of jumped back into the Hughes pool a little bit, and I went with Pretty in Pink, kind of that quintessential Hughes film
Yeah.
here. Of course, it's got Molly Ringwald in it. Andrew McCarthy is the love interest for her. James Spader, again, back here being the a-hole that he's really good and adept at being. And then John Cryer, of course, who went on to greater things in Two and a Half Men, stars as Ducky, her quirky best friend. Also, I mean, her father's played by Harry Dean Stanton in it. Nice little
Yeah.
role for him, kind of filling a void in his career for just a little while there, putting him out front. It has the whole feel of the movie has that Brat Packish feel to it. Everything about it, to the soundtracks that are picked. The all the I look at that and I go, wow, these are all the '80s kids that I know. Poofy hair,
Yep.
hip fitting jeans, all that stuff. All those styles of the time just kind of all stand out to me and remind me of high school. So I'm going to put Pretty in Pink here at number three.
Yeah, that's one of those quintessential ones, like you said, that I was referring to earlier with St. Elmo's Fire. They're definitely right in the hub of the Brat Pack movies. My number two is probably one of the adjacent ones, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's a John Hughes movie. That's the only reason it's in here because it doesn't really have any of the main people in it. It's got Matthew Broderick and Alan Ruck and Mia Sara as the girl. And again, this takes place in Chicago, a little different. I noticed John Hughes, when I was going through his filmography, only directed 8 films total. And this was one of them. So that's the main reason I put it in. It fit into that mid 80s youth movies. There's so many. I think the Brat Pack spurred on a lot of youth oriented films. They became box office draws, these young actors. I have a bunch of them written down here if I can find them. Yeah, I mean that are outside the Brat Pack, but still youth oriented, like Stand by Me and Risky Business, The Goonies, The Lost Boys, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Dirty Dancing, Back to the Future, Footloose. These were all box office bonanza pictures, and Ferris Bueller fits right into that. So and Heathers is another one.
Yeah.
Gremlins. There's just so many of them that Ferris Bueller's Day Off is just this kid that's trying to get out of school and they go out there with his friends. He's going to Wrigley Field. He catches a foul ball on TV and he's pretty much thumbing his nose at the principal and rigs this bed where he pretends to be sick and an answering machine. And it's just a lot of hijinks that at the time I thought was enjoyable. So that's why I put it in here. And that's why I put it so high.
Yeah,
I liked it.
it's interesting to think that Matthew Broderick was 25 when he made this movie, and Alan Ruck was 29, which the publicist did not know at the time. They had already filmed the film. They're going out on press tours, junkets, and all this other stuff. And she finds out he's 29. She's like, "We can't tell anybody you're 29." Mia
Right.
Sara's just turning 18. And so it's like she should have got to lie. So you're same age as Matthew, 25. We can sell. You just can't sell 20 to 29. That's
Right.
insanity when you think about it. I mean, that's crazy. Number two for me, you've already mentioned it. I think it's The Outsiders, even though it doesn't really fit the feel of a Brat Pack movie. There's just so many young stars that
Yeah.
are in that movie that went on to have stellar careers. We've mentioned Tom Cruise and Patrick Swayze, Ralph Macchio. Of course, he did
Yep.
the
Yep.
Karate Kid stuff. Was in it. You said C. Thomas Howell. Emilio Estevez. Just an all-star cast. But a great. I think it's a great script. Based on the book, which is a book that almost every teenager is required to read at high school at some point. The Outsiders is put in front of them to read because I think it kind of speaks to the high school dynamic and how some
Yeah.
kids are fit in and some kids don't fit in, and I think that's why that's kind of pushed on them. But an outstanding movie, and again, I know it's Francis Ford Coppola, but for some reason he managed to make a movie that kind of spoke to a generation of kids. They did a
He
good
did.
job on it. So
Yeah. Very good. All right, down to number one. Well,
round
I think
one.
we might have the same number one here. I'm going with the Breakfast Club, which is really the one that sort of has the stereotypes of the different kids. They're all held over for detention and for whatever reason and cloistered together and interacting. Normally, they wouldn't even give each other the time of day, and they all sort of have their moment shining in the sun here. It's got the cast, I think. All of these people belong in the Brat Pack. Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy. Who am I missing? Anthony Michael Hall and one other, whoever the
Judd,
fourth.
yeah, I mentioned Judd.
Judd Nelson. I miss Judd Nelson, who's really the ringleader at times in this. He carries a lot of the screen time. It's all divided up, but I think it's excellent. And like you've said before, I think this made one of your top 100 of all time. So I
Yeah.
know you think even more highly than I do, but I think of the Brat Pack movies. This is clearly head and shoulders above the rest for me.
Yeah.
And
I'm in a
and like
100% of agreement. It's number one for me too,
yeah,
because it's I can show this film to almost every generation of kids that I've had contact with for coaching or anything, and
yeah,
absolutely it can speak to them in some way. Those stereotypes that Hughes created in there, they
yeah,
exist in any classroom and any school across America. Those stereotypes exist and they're out there. I saw an interview with Judd Nelson in which he dressed up like he attended high school, undercover, dressed like John Bender, acting like John Bender, going to classes. He said, and you would not, he said, you couldn't even believe how badly you got treated by the administration, by teachers, by the other
yeah.
kids. He said they just automatically, based on your looks alone, put you into a category, and that's where they kept you. So I think that Hughes was on to something with this movie, that he knew this was going to speak to generations for just decades to come. It's just always going to be a relevant movie. So I could not
Yep.
have it number one. I think it's beautifully done.
And it applies. Not only is it an 80s film, but it would apply in the 1950s. These stereotypes existed back then. They exist today, where everybody's, you know, slotted. You're the pretty girl, the athlete, the jock, the nerd, whatever it may be. Every generation relates to this kind of film, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, I
That's why it
appreciate you
works.
doing this with me. I really do.
Yeah, anytime. It was fun to do, good to
Yeah.
look back and get a little perspective on these films.
Yeah. Be sure to like, sub, and comment down below. Guys, give us your top five. I know that there's probably only like a dozen and a half movies, maybe, that might be considered in the adjacent to Brat Pack categories, but it'd be kind of interesting to see how everybody stacks up here. I mean, Rich and I only landed on two that,
Right.
that were the same. I mean, we had three different ones each. So shows you just how, as much like-minded as we are, even we disagree on what we would consider the best. So
Right.
appreciate you guys joining us. Look for our continuing series of the 100 favorite movies of all time as we continue that next week. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.